Morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thanks again for joining us. This is day 2 of the PI19 community meeting. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, welcome. You missed quite a bit yesterday, but for those of you guys who are just joining us today, again, it's great to have you. I know there are a few people who like to join a minute or two after the start time, so I'll give those folks a few seconds to join. But while you're still here, if you could all pop into the chat and just wave hello and tell us where you're connecting from, it would be great to see who's with us and where they're from. I'll call out a few in the chat. So if you just want to pop into the chat there and just let us know where you're connecting from, that would be awesome. Johannesburg, we've got Steve who's in Mumbai. Ooh, New York, the Big Apple. Oscar, welcome from El Salvador. Excellent. That's a vacation spot on my bucket list. Miguel, unless you're a penguin, I'm pretty sure you're not from Antarctica, so. But welcome nonetheless. I see lots of folks from Myanmar. Excellent. Tulo is not in the capital of Kenya. He's in Kitui. Great to see you, Tulo. I wonder if it's raining there. Excellent. We have excellent folks. I see some new folks from yesterday that weren't there yesterday, but that's good nonetheless. Lots of folks were here from yesterday. That's excellent. Seattle is too hot for Miller this morning, but thank you for waking up this early and joining us nonetheless. Innocent from Uganda, thank you for joining us. Excellent. We've got a very good representation from everyone from, I think, pretty much everywhere. It's great to have you again here on day 2. Welcome. Day 2 focuses on a lot of our supporting work streams and some updates from the ecosystem. We'll hear from the folks at Interledger. We've got some really good updates on infrastructure. There were some mentions of those yesterday as well. So yeah, lots of a great packed day and great updates going on. So I'm going to kick things off by passing it to Sam, Vijay, and Miguel with the core team update. Just to give some housekeeping before I pass it over to Sam. Once more, we do have a Slack channel. I'll put that in the chat for you at some point. So those of you guys who are, there we go. Those of you guys who are not able to, there we go. So if you go to that Slack link, that's where we're having every conversation around the convening. If you've got any questions or any follow-up conversations, that's a place to do it. Feel free to sign up and join us there. Again, during our break, we have 2 trivia sessions again. These are the last 2. Your opportunity to dethrone Sam, or Sam, your opportunity to reclaim your crown. So again, I do encourage you all to stay on during the break time just to participate in our virtual trivia quiz, get a chance to become the champion. Please remember to use the same name that you used in yesterday's trivia sessions if you want your scores aggregated towards the final prize, which will be announced tomorrow. So with that, I will pass it over to Sam. Over to you.
Thank you, Simeon. Good morning, a very early morning for some of you, afternoon, evening, everyone. Good to be back at the community event. Today we have Miguel, Vijay, and myself talking about some of the updates on Mojaloop core maintenance. Also wanted to add that it was a great day yesterday with some very interesting sessions. It was great to hear updates from Mojaloop adopters and implementers. That said, let me share my screen and continue with the updates here. Simeon or Miguel, can you please confirm we can see this?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Thank you. Shout out to all the contributors, some working on vNext, many other features for Mojaloop. If you are also a contributor to Mojaloop, if you've added a PR or some kind of contribution to Mojaloop, this is mostly comprised of people who are contributing to Mojaloop in form of code, but we're open to other contributors, which will be recognized tomorrow. Today, we want to take a quick look at the Mojoloop program increment 18 updates. The focus was primarily on Mojoloop stable release V14, some testing updates, and then we'll look forward to the candidate items we have for the next PI, program increment 19. So we started off this PI prioritizing the node upgrade of Mojoloop core services. This has been on the backlog for quite some time. We're finally able to prioritize that in the DA, all the governance groups, and so that was one of the goals: upgrade the node services to the long-term support version 16, which has long-term support now. I think it stays up to 2024. There are also other changes bundled along with that. Wanted to upgrade the Ubuntu image version for images used in Circle CI, supporting dependencies, CI/CD config that has been updated for all the services. So that was one of our goals. And then following that, we wanted to do a Mojoloop V14 release that's well tested and published. This would essentially close out the item of node upgrade, ensuring that we have a node version that's supported for a couple of years to come. Along with that, we have the usual items. There is about 20-25% time that a few of us dedicate for supporting community in the form of bug fixes, absorbing the changes. For example, we wanted to support the other active work streams who are contributing to Mojoloop core, the third-party work stream, bulk work stream, and infrastructure as code, Miniloop, and other initiatives. Also, one of the goal was to make sure that these are absorbed into Mojoloop, sometimes in the form of Mojoloop releases, and other times in the form of documentation and relevant artifacts. Another goal was to also maintain the golden path tests for various tests. We have various features. We have 3 test collections, one for the Mojoloop transaction, the FSP interoperability API, and another couple of collections, one for bulk and one for third-party feature. So those were the goals we had at this time, and then we'll look at later today the updates related to that. So this is the Mojoloop component diagram we had. We present this every PI. For those of you who were in person in Arusha for PI 18, like we have this. Didn't want to go through every change here, but there are 5 new blocks which are highlighted here in purple blocks that we wanted to represent this program increment. Not all of these were done this PI, but these were not updated in our previous component diagrams. For example, previously we only had the API gateway here at the API security level. With the introduction of the business operations framework, we also have identity access management and role-based access control catered for. These are applied on the administration APIs. So as Paul Baker and the team have demonstrated in the previous community events and discussed yesterday, Ori was chosen for, and some of the frameworks there, Keto, Kratos, and Oathkeeper, used for various functions there. On the left side here, we also have the template set for various operations, for example, like reporting, operations, monitoring, and self-service portals. Some of these were already provided as part of the Finance Portal V3 in the micro-friendly, so that is the new block here. Whereas, more importantly, it sets a foundation on which other features can be built on and extended and customized as needed for schemes. In addition, we also have another block here. Instead of Rancher previously, we now have infrastructure management. It comprises of IAC at a platform level, bootstrap level, and also Miniloop. Another update we'll hear from Vijay and Miguel later on is we have the testing toolkit used for adding functional tests in CI/CD itself. So this is going to be very useful, a fantastic feature for testing for contributors. So these are some of the changes. This deck is uploaded on Mojoloop GitHub in the PI presentations repo. So feel free to have a look and reach out if you have any questions. So briefly looking at the updates for this PI, give me one moment to clear off all the drawings. So focus was on the V14 release, Mojoloop, upgrading node version. Along with this, obviously, no release goes with just one feature or one update. There was a liquidity check related update where liquidity check is now more strict and decreases risk. So Miguel will talk about this a bit later. This was approved in the DA, and we'll see the follow-up discussion about that. Third-party services, some of the services were still using v0.1 in the previous release, v13.x releases, but now they've been brought up to v1.0, which is the standard API now. And then there was we spent a good amount of time. SDK scheme adapter was rigorously tested and validated. There was a component of the payment manager Mojo Loop connector. So SDK scheme adapter is now merged with that component. So there is no fork of that. A lot of additional validations were added, bugs fixed. So for example, these are some representative bug fixes here. There was some of the transfers that were timed out were being stuck. And as a consequence, multiple notifications were being sent. So that was fixed, and some maintenance about charts that was fixed as well, that was addressed rather than fixed. And then there were also minor fixes in how the transfer states were being used in the SDK scheme adapter. So all these are bundled in the v14 release. It is looking good so far. We had a good release candidate. And it was validated multiple times, I think every day in the past 3 weeks or so. So it is looking good now. We also have some patches in mind with bulk updates that are coming soon. Also, we were able to support current adopters and implementers in the form of bug fixes and changes, not just on implementation side, but also on the change control side as well, with the changes to the APIs and discussions on extensions and enhancements. Along with supporting the third-party and bulk implementation teams with offering design reviews, pull request reviews, running the tests, deploying, and various things like that. This is a high-level overview. With that, I would like to pass it on to Miguel to take us through the details on v14 and other changes included there. Miguel, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see my screen? Yeah?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Sam. Let me just start with the introduction. So I'm Miguel de Barros from Motorsbox. I'm a principal architect, and I've been working on the open source funded development project for some time now. I'm part of the team designing and engineering the core Mojo Loop services. Also involved with some of the vNext architecture work, but although not involved as much as I would like to be recently. I'm also a member of the Mojo Design Authority, and most importantly, I'm a community contributor. So thanks, Sam. So this slide is pretty much just a release summary of what's kind of being wrapped up, included in v14 at a high level. I'm going to go through each of these in more detail, but this is just kind of a slide nicely to bring everything together. So I'll be going through each one of these points, and there are currently 7 of them you can see here. So starting on the first one. Right. Okay, sorry, wrong way. All right, so starting on the, let me just move this out of the way. On the service upgrades, right? So one of the biggest efforts that we spent in this PI was pretty much upgrading all our core services to LTS, so basically long-term supported runtimes for Node.js, as well as Ubuntu for the Docker images that we use via CI jobs, etc. And the reason for this is basically there was an increased concern around security and the vulnerabilities, since no patches or no security patches were being introduced into the versions of Node.js and Ubuntu that we were using, which is a concern. So that's basically being addressed as part of v14. And something else that this impacted our core components and our services was it hindered some of our upgradability from our dependency perspectives. In some cases, the newer version of Node.js these dependencies required a newer version of Node.js. So by us making sure that we are using the LTS version of Node.js, we're also making sure that we can use these latest versions of these dependencies. And once again, this will also improve on the security and vulnerability concerns that you would expect. And on point 2 here, let me actually use my amazing red pointer. On point 2 here, so just further adding on to that. So as we've gone through and upgraded all the LTS versions of Node.js, etc., we also took the opportunity to upgrade all the dependencies as we are making these changes throughout the code bases. And this, once again, further improves the security footprint. And this is something that we've already realized as some of the benefits that were mentioned in Godfrey's security report out yesterday. On point 3, we improved the maintainability through the standardization of the folder structures, the linting, the scripts, the Docker files, etc. Since we were touching all our repos, we took the opportunity to do that. And really, this has provided a huge benefit from a developer experience. Regardless of what repo you go to, you're more likely going to know where things are, how things work, some of the scripts, what the folders are, how to start things, etc. So you'll see very much a similar experience throughout the code base as a result of that. And then that kind of segues to point 4. It also gave us the opportunity to basically standardize our CI/CD configurations and our jobs, etc. And pretty much we can now lift and copy paste our CI configurations pretty much more or less in all our repos as a result of that. There might be a few minor configuration changes here or there, but in all intrinsic purposes, they are very much the same. A result of this, we've also updated our CI dependencies, which otherwise in Circle CI are known as orbs, which allows us to do certain things like check our security aspects, our licenses, our validations also from a security perspective. Those are all orbs that run as part of our CI/CD jobs. Another aspect that was also standardized was the release notifications for our CI/CD jobs, etc., for reporting successes and failures, etc. Previously, we had one notification for that, but we've now split it up. We basically fine-grained the reporting on our release pipeline to basically these 3 notifications. One for GitHub release, which is GitHub, which is for our release notes. Another notification for NPM, for any libraries. Another one for our Docker, so our container, our services themselves. And on the left here, you can actually see that here are 3 basically notifications that get done here. And there's some benefits to this, that why we did it, right? It's better visibility from an issue and resolution when there are broken releases and there's something wrong with our pipelines that are running. And it also gives us a direct link to our release artifacts. For example, here we have a link to the release notes. Here we have a link to the NPM package, and here we have a link to the Docker image, etc. And we also have a link over here to the CI job where that occurred. So if there was any issue or error, we can go directly to it. Why is this information useful? Well, it allows contributors to track their contributions. So once a PR is merged, they will get this feedback in the announcements channel. So just a reminder here. So this is an announcements channel within the Mojaloop Slack org. And as well as it's pretty useful for anybody who's interested in tracking these changes that are made to Mojaloop services. I would say most people are more likely going to be more interested in the release notes that are happening here. The Docker NPM libraries, once again, anyone can use these if they require. I would still recommend using the Helm releases and using those packaged versions when you deploy or upgrade Mojaloop, since those are the things that we test and verify at the end of the day, and make sure they all work and congeal together, right? The next slide is about, we've done a lot of work to improve the QA, and we've specifically done this for functional tests, and we've done this by introducing what we call the ML Core test harness. And here's the repo you can go to. And what this is a reusable, lightweight test harness that we've pretty much utilized for in our automated CI pipelines, and as well as it can be useful for local development as well. The most important things about it is it's based on the Mojaloop testing toolkit, and it allows the existing test case collections that we have golden path, etc., to be executed on the CI and local dev pipelines. So, in other words, the same tests that run when you run on a Helm deployment, aka when you run the Helm test command, you can use that as part of our CI/CD pipelines or local development, etc. And we also have the opportunity to use a subset of those if required. So we don't have to run everything. In some cases, it doesn't make sense to run everything. So we can choose piecemeal aspects of those particular test case collections and run those as required. Another aspect of this test harness, it provides quite a lot of flexibility with how we cater for many use cases. And we use what we call profiles. And this is actually an intrinsic component that Docker Compose offers, right? On the right here, you can see we have a bunch of profiles here. And it allows us to choose what we want to start up and what dependencies we want, etc., when we need to run things. So, for example, we can start the all services profile, and that will start up all the backend components, dependencies, etc. At the moment, we only cater for the discovery, the agreement, and the transfer phases of Moduloop. For example, we don't necessarily have bulk, etc. But that's something that I'm hoping that the community will add and contribute and enhance on that, etc. But at the end of the day, the idea is one can choose what to start up, where to start it up. And that means, once again, this is now going back to the lightweight aspect of this harness for CI pipelines and local developments. You only start what you need to be able to test this. And one of the other aspects worth mentioning, one of the key other reasons that we introduced this was in every one of our repos, we had something like this. We had a Docker Compose file, and we had some scripts, etc., to be able to start these things up and test them for integration tests, functional tests. And it was actually a huge headache to try to keep these things maintained, up to date, etc. So the idea now is we have now a central place where this is now managed and maintained. And it means now that we can leverage these on all our core services, and we can bring that into our CI pipelines. So in summary, that's the core benefit that we're going to get you. Also worth mentioning, you can use any kind of combination of the profiles. So for example, here we can start up multiple profiles, Name IP adapter, central ledger, etc. A bit later on, you will see a demo from Vijay. He will take you through how this looks and where this has actually been implemented in the central ledger CI pipeline. The next, Helm release and maintenance. So this is now segueing to the other slide that I talked about, the LTS upgrades. So with this version 14 release, we've upgraded all the LTS components. We're including our bug fixes, latest releases. I'm not going to go into too much detail about those, since we have a very detailed release notes, which I'll show you a little bit later. But this is in essence what's being included, right? And the second point here, which actually this may impact switch implementers. So anyone who's running a Moduloop switch itself, we've updated deprecated backend dependencies. So what's happened is Bitnami has introduced a new policy retention, which means that they only keep Helm chart versions up to 6 months. So we needed to basically upgrade those versions, and those versions are now breaking, which may cause an issue. And as such, upgrades will not be as straightforward as we would like. So just be aware of that. And this once again goes to the point that I previously raised in previous PIs, and we'll also see this as a roadmap item, is about the need to make sure that we're removing the backend dependencies directly from the Helm charts. So I think it's a reiteration of that. Third point here, we've deprecated the finance portal versions 1, versions 2, etc. And that is because a version 3 was introduced along with the work that was done for the business ops framework. So all those aspects of the RBAC, the security, etc., and the microservice frameworks that were introduced as part of the business ops framework, they were rolled up into a new version of the finance portal. And as such, that has basically deprecated these versions. Be aware that in the Helm, Moduloop Helm chart, which included the V2 version of the finance portal, that's been now removed. There is a separate Helm chart that we now need to use to be able to deploy this version 3. In the release notes, I have more information about that and where you can find that, etc. Next is about core clearing. There's been a change to how we do the liquidity check or the calculations. And this impacts the deferred settlement models pretty much, right? So liquidity cover is now based on available funds in the settlement account. So be aware this is going to maybe impact the switch implementers themselves. This means that you need to make sure that you do funds in to make sure there are available funds in the settlement account to be able to actually do transfers, etc. The net debit cap is now a true limit. Previously, in a deferred settlement model, the net debit cap was the only check for this. And what does this mean? It means the liquidity check is against the lower of the two. It's either going to be the available funds or it's going to be the net debit cap limit. And the reason for this is it's pretty much aligned to the upcoming versions of the V3 of settlements and settlement models. And this is something Michael Richards has been working on, etc. And two, it reduces liquidity risk and it simplifies the settlement process. So I think this is quite an important thing. So we've seen in the real world implementers of Mojaloop, where they're implementing settlement processes, it ends up being quite complicated because they add a lot of compensating actions that are needed by implementers to be able to make sure that they reduce the liquidity risk as a result of this. So we believe this is an elegant solution to do that as a result of that. The next, so there's been quite a major update to the SDK scheme adapter. Previously, Modusbox had forked the scheme adapter to, which we called the Mojaloop connector, which was a component or a key component as part of the payment manager for Mojaloop product. That is in the works, hopefully to be contributed to the Mojaloop Foundation. And as such, there were a lot of new functionality and benefits that were added to that version of the SDK scheme adapter. And there was effort to basically make sure that we merge that back into the scheme adapter itself and make sure that the PM4ML is using the SDK scheme adapter within the Mojaloop org instead of the forked version. And pretty much what did this introduce? Well, we added additional testing hooks for better QA capabilities. We've improved the security mechanisms introduced by the PM4ML for certificate management. There's also been improved alignment to the FSP IP specification, and this is specifically for the outbound API of the SDK scheme adapter. So this is the SDK, so for example, a core banking system would interact with the SDK scheme adapter, send out a request or receive a callback, etc. There were some items such as statuses and extension lists, etc. that were missing, they've been added in, as well as the support for real-time monitoring via Prometheus for operational monitoring purposes that were also introduced. And I think this is hopefully the last, well, more or less the last slide. With regard to third-party APIs. And so be aware this is going to impact FSP and switch implementers that are using third-party features. There has been an upgrade of the third-party components to adopt the latest V1 API specification. So previously, it was V1 0.1, I believe, and there were some substantial changes to that API specification. And as a result, we've refactored the API code, the components which accommodate the changes, as well as updating the test TTK, the testing toolkit test collections to match those V1.0 API changes. Down below, we have a notable bug fix, or no, like I'm only going to list one, which I think is pretty much the most important one that is going to impact most switch implementers or people run switches. Is and this was actually picked up by OnePay, and this is pretty much about timeouts. We picked up a bug when a transfer was sitting in an aborted error state, which is an internal state within the switch implementation itself. For some reason, well, not for some reason, we know why. We can read more information about why that occurred here, but basically that would basically kick off timeout events internally within the switch itself, and we would constantly see those events being produced ad hocly as a result of this particular bug. So that's been cleaned up, and hopefully that means your timeouts are going to look a lot better. Sorry about my voice, I'm just recovering from a bit of flu. So just to wrap everything up here, so we have Mojaloop 14. Once again, you can go to the Mojaloop Helm releases page or link over here. Here you can see all the release notes for all the versions we have. Here is a direct link to the version 14.00 release candidate. Here's a bit.ly link as well. And once again, I really suggest you go and have a look at these release notes in detail. We include all the new features over here. You can see the bug fixes. We include more detail on any breaking changes and anything you need to be aware of and how to potentially circumvent them, as well as information on how you can test it, etc. I think that's it for me. I think I'm going to hand over to VJ.
Thanks, Miguel. Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. Hello, everyone. This is Vijay Kumar, working for ModusBox as solution architect and I'm a Mojaloop contributor. So I'm going to speak about the updates of testing toolkit. So in PI80, the first and foremost update is upgrading Node to version 16, LTS version. We upgraded many components in testing toolkit like backend, frontend, shade library, and client library. As part of that, as Miguel mentioned, we fixed the package.json, Circle CI, config files, and some dependency checks. And coming to new features, we added the prefix path and hostname options for an API provision in the testing toolkit. For example, if we have two APIs with the same resource name, then TTK will not be able to pick one API based on the inbound request. So that's why we need to provide more information, like we can configure a prefix for one of those APIs. And based on the inbound request and matching that prefix path, TTK can pick that API. Same case with host name. We can configure a host name. And can you see my screen?
No, we don't.
We could, but it just went away.
Yeah.
It's back.
No, yep.
Yeah.
What about now?
Yeah,
Yes,
I can
it's
see it
back.
now. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so we added the host name and prefix path, and then we changed the port from 5000 to 4040. TTK was using 5000 port for the API for listening to the API requests. The problem is Apple adapted that port, 5000 port, for AirPlay receiver in the recent versions of macOS. That's why we changed the port to 4040 to support the developers, so that they won't face any problem when they are deploying TTK in their local machines. And we created a new repository to maintain testing toolkit client libraries and tools. Currently, we have command line client. So we migrated that command line client from TTK backend service to the client repository. So by using this lightweight repository, we also implemented the functional testing in the CI/CD of core services using testing toolkit. I will go through a job in the central ledger Circle CI pipeline. And then, as always, we supported teams who are interested in testing toolkit. So, client library. Yeah, we created this new repository. So this repository publishes an NPM package and a Docker image. So by importing these NPM package or Docker image, we can trigger the TTK test cases inside the CI/CD of any Mojaloop component. And using the TTK CLI tool, And also the new test harness created, as Miguel mentioned, we can spin up the dependent services using this test harness. For example, let's say central ledger. If we want to execute a P2P transfer inside the central ledger CI/CD. So we need to start the ML API adapter quoting service, Kafka, and many dependencies. So we can start the dependencies, what dependencies we want using this test harness, and trigger the functional test using testing toolkit client. So you can see this is the new job added, functional tests, and we added a P2P transfer, for example, and you can see the there are 27 assertions passed.
And just to further add on to that, you can see here that it only took 3 minutes and 42 seconds to run, which is exactly what we're making sure. We're trying to make sure this is lightweight, it runs on pretty much any kind of small commodity hardware, etc., without much overhead for these purposes. So quick and fast is what we need here, and consistency.
Thanks, Miguel. So this is the Circle CI interface, and let's see this commit. This is test functional test job, and here we it is downloading the test harness, and after downloading, we just need to execute a command. You can see the report here. Let's scroll to the top. Okay, so this is the command we are executing. That's it. We are not doing anything else. So this command spins up all the necessary dependent services and trigger the TTK test. So yeah, this is about functional testing. Okay, so next I want to show a short demo on the new feature in the testing toolkit. So these are the APIs provisioned in the testing toolkit. This is the testing toolkit user interface, by the way. So for example, there is FSPOP API and SDK outbound schema adapter API. So these two APIs contain a resource name called get parties. So if we send get parties to the testing toolkit, it always picks up FSPOP if we don't provide any other any additional information. So in that case, we can configure the prefix for this API. Like if we send /SDK out /parties, then it will pick up this one. Otherwise, it picks up the FSPOP API. So I'm going to set this in monitoring mode and send a call command, HTTP request. So you can see I'm sending this request to localhost 4040, which is testing toolkit /parties MSA SDN and the number. And this is the inbound request to the testing toolkit. Here, API matched FSPOP. And it responded with 202. Now let me add the prefix here. SDK out to the same request. And we get another request. So now API matched is outbound schema adapter. And you can see the synchronous response here because the outbound SDK schema adapter API is synchronous API. So in the same way, we can configure the host name. In some services, maybe we can't add a prefix unless we modify the code. In that scenario, we can configure the host names And using the host names, we can tell testing toolkit to pick up the corresponding API. So yeah, that is it for the demo and the testing toolkit. Any questions? Over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Okay. Miguel, can you walk through us through some of the roadmap items, and then I will close off.
Sure. Just going over the roadmap items for PI19. So the first is about supporting patch notifications on failures, and this is now potentially introducing a new version of the transfers for the FSP IOP API, so version 1.2. So at the moment we have version 1.1, and we support patch notifications, but this is not just the success case that we have implemented at the moment. And this now caters for failure scenarios, and it also allows for pay FSPs to be able to respond with a transfer state of committed. In other words, they do not want to receive a patch notification, but now with this, it opens up the opportunity for them to receive a patch notification, even if they respond with a transfer state of committed on a failure, so that at least they are being made aware of it. So that's quite an important thing, I think. And that's hopefully will be done for this PI. The next item is about updating the existing Helm charts to support LTS Kubernetes versions. So as you saw, there's been a huge drive to be able to support LTS versions with regard to Node.js, with regard to Ubuntu, etc. And similarly, we're falling behind on the Helm side of things to be able to support the latest versions of Kubernetes that do provide support, etc. You will hear a lot more about this, or at least a similar theme, in later discussions on the infrastructure side when Tom Daly and David Fry speak. But basically, the idea is we need to be able to resolve this, and there's a couple of ways that we're going to do this, and I'm going to propose this. One is to actually, once again, remove the external dependencies from the Helm charts. Once again, those dependencies are introducing breaking changes to support these new versions of LTS, and we are not able to upgrade to them since we are not supporting those versions as of yet. So we need to make sure that we separate those dependencies so it doesn't impact our module of the releases going forward. The other main key thing that we need to do is update our ingress configurations in our Helm charts. Since that API in Kubernetes has changed, we need to follow suit and make sure we support that going forward. The third item here is about the bulk implementation SDK scheme adapter and related components. So this is very much about what Paul Baker discussed yesterday in the last session. This is basically implementing additional features into the scheme adapter to support additional modes in terms of how that's done, as well as introducing better tests, more wider tests in terms of what's already supported from a bulk implementation perspective. The fourth item here, so this is about our tracing components to use the latest OSS standards. So as part of the work that we've done to upgrade our components to the latest version of Node, as well as upgrading the dependencies in the event stream processor, we've picked up that there are actually 2 APIs or dependent libraries that we use that have been deprecated, and there's new versions that we need to upgrade to. In doing so, there'll be quite a lot of refactoring that will need to happen as a result of that. And as such, as part of this, I would like to see better adoption of better OSS standards with regard to tracing in terms of open instrumentation, etc. Libraries and standards that have been released since we've done these implementations of the event tracing components. And I think this also gives us an opportunity for 0.5 to have better cohesion and work together or work closer together with the vNext implementation in terms of how that's done, and not just in the tracing, but other aspects as well. So I think there is a great opportunity here to have some collaboration and also build on what the vNext guys have done, and also make sure that the tracing components that we have is also moved to the next level in terms of, or evolved to the next level in terms of how we're going to see things in the future going forward. Sam?
Thanks, Miguel. Yeah. So recently, I was very excited to hear from the ThyssenKrupp or the WinePay team that they'd like to start contributing to Mojaloop open source. So we only hope that we have many more teams like that, many more implementations of Mojaloop. So this is an ongoing item for us to ensure that we support new contributors to Mojaloop, especially on the core and things that are generic, so that the community and other adopters can benefit from that. We also dedicate some capacity every sprint, like a quarter of our capacity to ensure high priority issues, critical items that are very important to the success of our implementers are catered for. So there is a bug life cycle that that we talked about in our previous community events. It's there on GitHub. So we have a triage process, and then we identify the severity and take inputs regarding the priority, and then go ahead with the fixes. So some of the fixes we talked about like that in the V14 release. Similarly, we prioritize issues which we need to include in the next modular release. In addition to that, we also make sure that we absorb the dedicated feature teams that are working on Mojaloop, whatever they're delivering, to ensure that they are in line with Mojaloop standards. And if they are to go into a Mojaloop release, then they have tests, maintaining the tests, running the tests, deploying their services, those kind of things. So that way we want to support the community as well. In addition, any support on Slack that we can offer regarding clarifying how the core services work or how to deploy in collaboration with our infra teams as well. Tom and David try to support the community there. So we'd like to continue that. These are our roadmap items. Some of the things are obviously higher priority. For example, the first one, the patch notification on failures, which is coming with version 1.2 of the FSP interoperability API is high priority for our existing implementers, WinePay. But based on priority and bandwidth, we'd like to take up these items. Hopefully, during tomorrow's roadmap planning sessions, the top 3 items here, the top 2 and some of the others will be prioritized. That was it for us. Thank you, Miguel and Vijay, for everyone for following this. There are some interesting discussions and questions regarding the functional tests. We hope we are able to answer that. And also regarding the business operations framework. Paul Baker, if you're on, I don't know if you want to offer any more regarding how the business operations framework and a finance portal are related. I think we have about 2-3 minutes. Simeon, correct me if I'm wrong, but if not, thanks everyone.
I can allow this one question or comment. We've just got 2 minutes to the end of this session, if there's any.
Okay, Paul, any comment?
On the business ops framework?
Yeah, so Paul Makin's earlier question was how are the finance portal and the business operations framework related? I provided some clarification, but if there's anything you would like to add, please go ahead.
Yes. So in the at the end of the BizOps framework project, we wanted to include some of the financial portal functionality, and what we found was there was an incompatibility between the 2 different RBACs and the methods, and trying to get both of them to work at the same time. So instead, what we did is we transferred that functionality into micro front ends so that they fit inside the BizOps framework. And that's where our maintenance has been. So once we moved over from the financial portal version 2 into the BizOps framework, all our changes in maintenance and ongoing support has been in the BizOps framework micro front ends. So the way to think about it is the financial portal now exists inside the micro front ends that are presented in the BizOps framework. But the framework is a framework, and there's no limit there. It can be customized, extended, added to, and is there really to drive a community use of it and contributions.
Thanks, Paul. Simeon.
Thanks, Sam. Miguel, Vijay, Paul, appreciate your session. Again, I see some chatter in there, like I can see Sam and others also making comments in the chat. So feel free to for the discussion there or on Slack as well.